Hey. Figured something out.
So what?
I figured something out.
And what was that?
Early in the morning, before I've had any coffee at all or barely coffee, I am not capable of hitting more than 2 buttons.
That's right. You have to hit buttons very carefully. Hey, we've got Maynard Saves here in the Trusty Ape podcast.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, what you're doing? I think I named this. I named this "What You're Doing."
Yeah, that's a good idea. What I was doing before you texted me, because I was going. Now, are we going to do this thing at 8? I can't remember what we decided. And
We decided 8.
Huh?
We decided 8. I think.
Yeah, we decided 8, but
yeah.
I didn't know if it was for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like for sure today. And so I started watching some stand-up comedy, and I noticed TJ. Yeah, well, funny's funny, even if it's because usually you're going to get 6 or 7 minutes on YouTube, and so you go and you find some stand-up. I was also looking at other things, which we'll talk about in a minute, but TJ Miller came, was recommended and served up, and I recall he got canceled for something. And I'm trying to remember what it was, although the thing he was on that I settled on was a show called Set List. And the concept is we come up with a set list and you have to improvise. And so they walk up there on the stage and the topic flashes up there and you do a riff on it. And it may be sort of like those game shows where they show them like on Hollywood Squares, they used to show them the answers so they can think, or the questions so they can come up with a response in their head. And maybe they did that. I don't know, but it was hilarious.
So how did he get canceled already? He just started a few years ago, right? He's not an old popular.
I think he's a seasoned stand-up comedian, but not a seasoned actor.
Yeah, but nobody.
I don't know what he did or whatever. I just recall that maybe he was canceled, but I don't see why. I mean, he was hilarious.
Nobody knew about him before Silicon Valley, right? I mean, he wasn't that popular, or was he?
I'm not sure. I'm not really knowledgeable about his career.
Yeah, I think. He was hilarious on Silicon Valley. I mean, it was you watched that series, right?
I actually did not.
Oh my goodness!
By the time I knew it existed, I would have had to go back and catch up, and I just at that time didn't see myself doing that.
As a programmer, you really need to watch it because
just don't tell anybody, I might get fired.
Oh shit, that's right. I mean, they got it right. They got so many things right about the business in Silicon Valley and stuff like that. And
so it's sort of like what? Sort of like the
the
Office, but for programmers and tech people.
Yeah, and it had kind of a reality to it. Yeah, exactly. And they just got a lot right about the startups and the funding and the bullshit and the pitches and and then you got the money guy who's just way over the top, an idiot. But you got to do everything. You got to kiss his ass. I mean,
the way a lot of software is done or proposed, it's ludicrous and it's poorly managed, and it ought to be the basis of an ongoing comedy series.
Yeah, it should. It really did. And they just hit it. They just hit it right. And then I don't know. I thought the whole series, beginning and end, was a work of art.
We're getting some people coming in here.
Try again.
Shut up, Siri's talking to me. My cat is bugging me. What the hell is going on this morning?
Yeah, it's Monday morning, man. Welcome.
Yeah.
You'd forgotten about Monday morning.
I forgot about Monday morning. So I started looking at that. The Israel. Did Steve Martin do a song called "The Israelites" or something like that?
He did King Tut.
He did King Tut.
Yeah.
And then there was a song called "The Israelites," right? That was like popular for a while, like 30 years, 50 years ago. The Israelites. I can't remember.
I don't remember that.
Anyway, I imagine Steve Martin singing "The Israelites" instead of King Tut. You know, I don't know. I don't know if I imagined this.
Maybe there was some sort of routine going out, but that's 30 years ago, man.
Anyway, what was the name of the book I'm talking about? Because I left it upstairs.
Look in your text message thing, because I think I sent you a copy of the same or image of the same book, because
Right,
I ordered it
the
day you ordered it. Remember, there was one on there for $194, and we were both going for it, and you got it first, and I was pissed. So I had to order it for a slightly higher used price, but it's still a delightfully cheap price.
I think you paid $195 for yours.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
You just have to be so competitive.
I am very competitive. Well, when it comes to one click, I am the Amazon one clip. I am the fucking master.
Yeah, you did. You beat me right out of it. Hey, Rebecca's here.
Hey, Rebecca. Oh, yeah, just the person I wanted to talk to about some of this stuff. Okay, so it was who were the early Israelites and where did they come from?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that, but I'm caught in the middle of that. You've got the picture of it in front of you too. That big thick book by Theodore Lewis on the origins and character of God.
Right.
Really excellent book. Very detailed. It's got over 1,000 pages, yet only 700 pages of that is actual text, and the rest is notes and subject index and bibliography. If you want a scholarly work, it's a dream come true. So and plus I'm reading William Deaver's Beyond the Texts, and just because I'm a nerd, I'm listening to the Bible's Buried Secrets, or that that classic book by Israel Finkelstein and his colleague, on audiobook. They have that on audiobook.
Okay.
That's the one where they're making a strong case for the compilation of the Torah and everything in the 6th and 7th centuries.
Yeah, so I know nothing about the Bible or anything, so I'm coming into this pretty cold. But I started reading part of this while I was making this amazing soup, which is something we should probably dedicate a show to, how I made that soup. But anyway, later. So I was reading this, and he kept he was talking about Exodus in the beginning. The whole thing where they came from Egypt,
right?
Like 2 million of them.
Well, where the
they never made that claim. They claimed they could raise 600,000 soldiers, right?
Yeah.
And so they estimated 2 million in the population, and the archaeological evidence is horrible.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, Sal Cordova has a friend who comes on his site. This military guy is like an ex Navy SEAL. And I think he went out and got a degree. You know who I'm talking about, Pat?
Yeah. He got a PhD in apologetics or something.
Yeah, and then I think he may have written a book, or he's got a site, but he does a lot of work with archaeological evidence, I think. So it would be interesting to hear what he thinks he has, because according to this guy, they don't have much. Don't got nothing.
Well, it's been a weakness of Christian and a lot of Jewish archaeologists and scholars to make a little more out of the evidence than they should.
Right.
So that's not surprising.
Yeah. So, but it was kind of fun. It was like a big desert, and then I realized I have little idea of the geography of the area, which you have to know.
Well, there should be good maps in there. There are good maps in William Deaver's book, as well as are there maps of Israel in the Ted Lewis book? I don't know, but usually these things are accompanied by pretty good maps of where the city, or you can just pull up a map of ancient Israel on Google. Maps or geography is not a real problem if you just take a little time to familiarize yourself with it.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do is come up with a timeline, and the thesis in this book, the thesis in this book is that the Old Testament was basically, it was a bunch of disparate documents that were brought together by three groups: the P group, the J group, and the
E group.
The E group. Okay,
and then there's a D group. Deuteron. Okay, it's too early to say Deuteronistic or whatever. But yeah.
And that was brought together 7th and 8th century.
More like 6th and 7th century, according to Finkelstein's thesis. And it's not just based on the fact, there's no Exodus, evidence in the desert or whatever. There are groups of people that are listed, in the biblical accounts that just did not have a presence until the 6th or 7th. Like, so we're talking about the Edomites and Aaron. I'm not going to try to remember it. It is Monday morning.
Yeah,
but these different groups of people that just did not have a presence until around the 6th or 7th century. The type of Egypt that the Exodus really describes was not the type of Egypt you're going to get until the 6th or 7th century, and so that's what they're going on with that. So they play with the timeline as it would be if the Bible were historical, and they compare the different societies to that timeline, and just say there's just no evidence that things were like this then.
Yeah, so being more of a science type, like, I would like to know exactly what was the Bible when it did come together. I mean, obviously they did not have Borders bookstores and
right.
And
I was just driving around wondering that. Must have been yesterday. I thought, where in Israel would they keep
the Bible,
all the different scrolls and things? However, remember, we talked about Gmerkin, Russell Gmerkin.
Did we?
Well, I've mentioned him, I think, but he's a scholar or a researcher, really, that Myth Vision, Derek Lambert, has interviewed, and I think was on Gnostic Informants channel too. He thinks that all of the actual writing of the Torah was done down in Alexandria, Egypt, where there was a lot of scholarship and a lot of Jewish presence. So anyway, but I just kept going. I wonder where the library was where you would go and yank a scroll of the Chronicles of the Kings or whatever, and by that I mean some of the writings that the authors refer to in the biblical text itself. In other words, they're saying, is it not written in this ancient text or this older text? And so even the corpus of the biblical text refers back to earlier sources, which is, to me, awesome. And the thing that would make me do headstands and twirls around the neighborhood would be if they ever discovered some of those documents. That would be so awesome.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a fascinating deep dive to go into, and I do believe, like Ted Lewis as well as Israel Finkelstein and Deaver, that rather than having the Bible in one hand and the spade in another, it's better to just do the archaeology come up with your conclusions and only refer to the Bible, as a secondary source.
Yeah, and the other thing, okay, so God, my mind's going in so many different directions. But so the first thing you look at is like, what is it? What is the nature of this text that we're talking about? And at what point, like today, we know that we have this Bible, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this group of texts, like a lot of scrolls that were written. Okay, let's take a look at the Christian standpoint. The Christians believe that God inspired these words, right? That God wrote these basically through a proxy. Is that correct? That's the Christian point of view.
But what?
The Old Testament was written by God through a human proxy. It was
Yeah,
the word of God, right? Word of God. Okay, so they wrote down the word of God, say in 10th century BC, 8th or 9th century, okay, BC. They wrote it down, and then they wrote it down in a lot of different texts, and then editors put it all together into one book. Okay, were all these editors being inspired by God? And then when they copied it for the next 800 years before we got to around the time of Christ, right? Were all these people that all the people that copied it, all the people that edited it, all inspired by God?
Well, I think what the theologians or apologists would say is that God had a preservation process where he preserved the work of the prophets or the saints or whatever in making sure that the word of God came to you in perfect form.
Right. So there was the hand of God kept.
Yeah, the hand of God throughout all that.
Right. Kind of like, well, that relates to some biology ideas about evolution. And, God just kept tweaking and tweaking and tweaking the DNA, all along the way. Interesting. So, but I mean, the likelihood of, all those people getting together and actually keeping the word of God, I mean, that is a miracle on its own. That sort of thing.
Yeah, but it's especially given the inconsistencies and things like that, it's a long shot,
Yeah. So do you think we could do anything like a presentation on this little morning thing, which I'm not sure how committed we are to this, but we're going to try it for a while. But if we could do like, timelines and maybe show some maps and stuff like that and talk about.
Yeah. Now, we could probably pull up some segments of Useful Charts channel that would actually, who's done a really good job of making such timelines. But yeah, we could do that. But I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit if I can.
Sure.
The other day, I know when Jefferson was on here with us, as well as a few others, I mentioned Trent Horn and some things that he'd been pointing out, but I kind of got the point of it wrong, and I wanted to correct myself a little bit.
Okay.
Basically, because James Fodor was doing a really good coverage of the resurrection, kind of doing a counterpoint to Trent Horn's claims about the resurrection. I'm sorry, what? Yes.
Look who's here.
I know, David's here.
The late David.
He might be on the work site or something.
I don't know. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Send him a link and let's get him on here if we can. But anyway, so all that talking, but and responding to Trent Horn made me think about the things I said about him on Friday. I wanted to kind of correct what he was saying. I said he was saying some counterpoints to the evidentialist point of view, and that really wasn't the evidentialist point of view that he was kind of going after, but he was going after the point of view that people give, like when an apologist or evangelical Christian will ask a Christian, what would it take for you to become a believer? And then what they usually do is give some version of a type of example that often non-Christians will criticize, and they'll say something like, well, if a limb grew back suddenly in view of everybody, like if an amputee had a leg grow back or an arm grow back,
Right.
they might say, like Matt Dillahunty and others, that if the stars rearrange themselves in the sky to say, I am Yahweh, or worship me, or whatever, then that might do it. And so what Trent was criticizing, Trent Horn, was not the kind of evidentialist perspective as opposed to presuppositional, but he was saying that kind of approach where a naturalist would always say, well, there is a naturalist explanation is most likely above and beyond a supernatural explanation. And because that is kind of the natural position that all these miracle claims is better explained by crowd psychology or misinterpretation of the evidence or what you're seeing or something like that. There's going to be always some naturalistic explanation that's superior to a supernaturalistic explanation,
Right.
even if that naturalistic explanation is of low probability. And so, well, there he is. There's David.
There's David.
Come on
Hello.
in, sir. How you doing?
Hey,
Hello.
David.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Hey.
Doing great now that you're here, man.
Yeah, we're kind of okay.
So real quickly, so anyway, that's what Trent Horn was criticizing. It wasn't the fact that you're bringing evidence or whatever against your a Christian point of view. It's that you're using a kind of reasoning that you've already refuted. The fact that there's always going to be some naturalistic explanation, but the problem I have with Trent is essentially what I think it's the case that when you start bringing up naturalistic possibilities as an explanation for miracle claims, most of the time the naturalistic the naturalistic explanation is the best. But what you're really asking people to do is to name the limit to where a naturalistic explanation could be sufficient. I think everybody conceptually has a limit to where they will allow naturalism to remain the kind of the guiding principle.
Right.
And by asking that question, you're just telling the apologist or telling the evangelistic person where your limit is rationally as a naturalist, as somebody who looks at a naturalistic point of view. It doesn't make it more logical. It just tells you as a human where your credulity is.
Right.
So but anyway, so I kind of stated what Trent Horn in that video I watched was saying. I kind of stated it wrong, and I might not have stated it very well here, but I think it's more correct. But of course, Trent Horn basically he was saying that maybe atheists need to quit doing that because they're violating their naturalistic principles.
Whoops.
But return to the classic arguments, which I don't think really helps them out very much. But a lot of Catholics are really into those traditional Thomas Aquinas and some classical arguments about God. But I don't know.
Proving God with a syllogism or philosophy.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't even do that. You can't even apply that to naturalism or anything for that matter. I don't think, syllogisms and what, yeah, maybe you can. I mean,
Yeah.
A philosophical argument is a little more complicated than a goddamn little 5-line syllogism.
It's almost like it's almost equivalent, what Trent is saying. And it's true. People do have limits to where their brain can go with naturalistic points of view, and it's different from time period to time period. Maybe a decade or two ago, I would have had a different limit to naturalistic explanations, but now, whenever people have talked about the stars being reorganized in the sky to have a message, even then there's a few steps I would have to go through to make sure that some kind of illusion, it was not being perpetrated up against us and things like that. So even in the face of some sort of overwhelming sensory input, you still would want to take a skeptical approach to verify certain things.
Yeah, I'd like to step back even a little bit further. Like,
hey, can we ask David a quick question?
oh, sure.
David, are you sitting in your work truck with a hard hat on and one of those curved-topped metal lunch pails?
No. I'm actually home right at the moment. But...
Well, awesome.
Yeah. So what do we? You guys? Are you like researching like the early origins of the Bible? Is that kind of what you guys?
Yeah, that's
maybe any architecture, archaeology.
That's
stuff?
part of what we're up to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, we just decided to get online and blather a little bit in the mornings for a while and see how it works out.
Yeah, I think we've met our blather quota. At least I have.
Yeah, blather quota. That sort of
thing.
Maybe get into some philosophy and get into some maybe a little science.
Speed has basically wants a timeline of what they think actually happened.
Yeah,
which is obviously a lot more speculative, but that is a good thing.
Can elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well,
what you think actually happened? What do you?
Okay, evolutionists think that basically all species, they had like a common ancestor, right? But in order to propose that, you have to say, okay, well, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and we think this happened at 1 billion years, and this happened at 3 billion years. So we put together a narrative or a story, right? A historical perspective on what happened, and that is basically a theory, So it's a hypothesis, or I wouldn't call it a theory. I call it a hypothesis. It becomes a theory when you start to knit it all together. Well, we're applying the same thing to ideas about where the Bible came from and where Christianity came from, because it obviously had to have a timeline, right? And we know that the timeline goes back, about 3,000 years. So we're looking at 3,000 years for Christianity, Judaism and Christianity, right? So asking questions like, okay, when did the Old Testament actually come together as a document? Okay. And now you remember my scientism, right? That I talked about scientism. So I apply everything. So I want to look at everything like, okay, there was an actual bunch of paper or some kind of book that came together and coalesced sometime between way the hell back, and we got 1000 BC, and we got and then we go up to 0, right? So this is here we got CE after this. So anyway, during this time, when did this book come together as a book that human beings who lived in these a few hundred years BCE, when did they know that there was a Bible? When did it become like common knowledge that there was this book that we're going to call the Bible, and we have this religion called Judaism? When did that happen? I mean, did that if we went back to 500 BCE and asked the average person on the street about the Bible, would they know what the hell we were talking about?
No, it's based on, I don't know shit. So, but based on from what I hear from Christians and scholars and things like that, I think I mean, they claim that what they call the early church, right, which is the early fathers, gathered up 60 books, right, and
Yeah.
they put them together, and that would have been late, like in the 6th century, I believe. Would that be correct, Scott?
That's
Maybe.
these are the things we're trying to figure out.
Well, you
Yeah.
talk about the canon of the Bible, and that's a little bit different. But like the Hebrew Bible or the Torah or whatever, it was probably put together, prior to
Prior to that, yeah.
several centuries BC. But
Okay.
the church didn't recognize it, or maybe they sort of recognized it, but they didn't officially canonize it until well
So
after Christ.
probably what I'm describing would be more. Would that be the New Testament then, or is that how they did it? How old would the New Testament be? Would it be that old? Would it go back to the 6th?
Testament as a declared corpus, and then there's the actual books that make up that New Testament. So you have to kind of understand the difference between what you're talking about, and for the dating of any individual book, you just have to consult the different scholars. Like most scholars, the vast majority of scholars that really matter, put like the Gospel of John in the 90s or even later. Mark, I think, is dated into the 70s, and then Matthew and Luke, a few decades later, and then a few decades later still. And then, of course, the various letters that Paul actually wrote, because some of the letters of Paul in the New Testament are considered to be forgeries by the majority of scholars, but there are others that are that consider genuinely Paul in origin. Those are in the 40s and 50s AD. So as a collected book of recognized canon, that wasn't until like Randolph is saying in the side chat, like oh no, wait a minute, he's talking about something different. That was much later, and it was affirmed by various councils and stuff. But yeah, officially, that's much later, the official canonization, because once again, like Constantine, didn't get converted until in the 300s AD, and then that's when they started having the different councils that affected canonization.
Yeah, okay. There's the New Testament, which is Christianity, right? But then we have that is all embedded in the Old Testament, right? So the Old Testament was really important around this period, around zero, right? When Christianity popped up.
Yeah, the Torah was
right
for the Jews all important. Yeah.
Okay. So, but there was like out here in 400 AD, there was a canonization where they decided, okay, these are the books of the Bible. We're putting these together. Did they do that for both the New Testament and the Old Testament, or was the Old Testament an already collected, accepted group of manuscripts in before Christianity?
Well, it was a collected group of manuscripts, but even then, not all Christian groups agreed on what was in the Old Testament. Like there's like Maccabees and things like that might have been considered canon by some people that did not end up being canon by others. So even then there was some disagreement, but all of that was being hashed out in the 400s, 500s, 600s. And I wish I was more familiar with the dating of all that, but I'm not. The councils, growing up as a Baptist, a very conservative Southern Baptist, I didn't care what the councils put together. It was like, this is the Bible. It's what I believe. It's true. I don't need, some group of men to tell, which was kind of a silly attitude. But so I didn't spend much time learning dates and things like that.
Yeah, I just Randolph has some things to say here, so I shot him a link. Let's see, Christos was basically pagan followers. I'm trying to follow what he's saying. So we have two things to put together. We have Judaism and just the belief in God in general, right? And that all happened like prior to Christ, right? Or prior to this era, and kind of kept going for a while. And then Christianity sort of took over. But Christianity was built on the bed of Judaism.
Right. Like, Christ, Jesus Christ was the fulfillment of messianic prophecy, which whether or not they were interpreting the Old Testament right, did come from the Old Testament.
Yeah, so we got this period, roughly 2,000 years BCE, and somewhere in here, like 800 BCE or 8th century, 7th century, that religion was coalescing into, and it had documents. Okay, the Bible. That's what we're trying to figure out. No,
I hear some people. I mean, some people actually refer to Jesus as a Jewish rabbi, basically, right?
Yeah, well, of course he
so,
was.
Kind
of.
Right.
Yeah. He had to be, right? There was no
right.
There was no Christianity while he was alive.
Right. Prior to that, right?
Yeah. So we got this bed of Judaism. I'm just trying to figure out the Old Testament and the historicity of that.
Now, there are historians that will classify Jesus' type of teaching as and call him an apocalyptic preacher. I don't know if they consider him,
33
Orthodox, or official kind of rabbi or not, like Bart Ehrman and
Dr.
James Tabor.
Dr. Josh would be basically an expert in this particular area, right? Because this is his expertise, right?
Yeah,
in that area, right?
Yeah, and just how do they classify Jesus? Apocalyptic preacher, but is an apocalyptic preacher considered a rabbi? Is my question, just like a point of clarification that I would like to get from somebody like Dr. Josh or other biblical scholars.
Yeah, Randolph's got a lot of things here that we should take a look at here. So, let's see, sometimes later on, quite a while after 500 BCE and before 1 CE, there were some people called Christos and other such names, which began to refer to very early Christians. Now, I didn't know that. That's
I don't know if it's Josephus or Tacitus. Ancient historians. Josephus was a Jewish historian, and Tacitus, I'm not sure what his history was, but one of those mentioned a guy named Christos, but and some people say, well, that's Christians, and others will say, no, that's a different individual or a different personality altogether.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd like to answer some of those questions, but overall, what I would like to do is keep it focused around what I call reality, which is a timeline. That there were actual events that happened in a timeline. If we're talking about the Bible is not a concept. It is an actual set of documents that existed in one form or another. And what I'd like to know is what all those forms of the Bible were, going way back to when it was just coming together as a bunch of prokaryotic cells about to create the first multicellular organism.
Boy, talk about that.
Oh, is that a
second an analogy?
But I mean, there was a bunch of disparate manuscripts for the most part, or maybe two manuscripts, a Pentateuch and or what does Deaver like to call it, the Quadrateuch or something. I think he said there were only 4 books. But anyway, so there were a couple of books that came together, and it coalesced into something that these people here ended up following, as a religion, that
Right.
these people prior to Christ, because the only way to understand Christianity is to understand what came before it, onto what bed of culture Christianity came out of, right? I mean, what created it?
Yeah, one thing I would like to get a sense from scholarship about is that period of time when people were returning from exile to back to Judah and Jerusalem, and figure out how big of transmigration or whatever that was, because I get the impression that mostly the elites and highly skilled people were taken away from Judah to go into the exile, and that's in the 7th century. And so then coming back, how many people were there, and then how do the books like Zerubbabel, or I'm sorry, how do the characters like Zerubbabel, as well as the guy who came back and was the governor. I don't know. I have to look at my post-exilic literature a little better. But how realistic were conditions there as portrayed in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting thing too.
What were the populations? What were the groups of people? So the thing that really struck me is that the Old Testament talks about these towns and these civilizations and these problems that the Israelites had in their migration, their exodus, right? But a lot of these towns didn't exist during the time that they actually supposedly made the exodus, but rather they existed when the editors came together and put the story together, right?
Right.
So
the editors, they didn't have the ability to do a whole lot of detailed historic research to figure out what point of view to try to portray as they wrote their Pentateuch. They were just going with the last couple of generations cultural memory about what things were like.
Yeah, it would be like if today I decided to write a history of Minnesota, and I wanted to write about the fur trade in the early, basically 18th and 19th century Minnesota, right? And so I talked about the settlement of Minneapolis, and in the process, I talked about this big problem that they had with crackheads down around the Mississippi River, that there was all these drug dealers and gang wars going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought that into my narrative that I'm supposed to be writing about 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's what's happening today. it's
it'd be a bit anachronistic.
Yeah, right.
When you're trying to project it back on third millennium,
right? Egypt. But it would make sense. It would make sense to the average Minnesota peasant, and we are all peasants here.
Yeah.
The average Minnesota peasant would say, "Oh well, when they were trying to take beaver furs and canoe down the Mississippi River, there were all these drug gangs that wanted to buy crack, and so they raided the furriers, right? And then we come up with this story about the amazing problems that they had because of crack dealers attacking them, right? That is what I'm getting out of this, right? Like, okay, is that it? I mean, is the history that bad? That, okay.
Well, and of course, remember there's a couple of aims in them even in undertaking that project, and that is to come up with a cohesive, one God to rule them all kind of faith and spiritual orientation, because since their society had been so fragmented and pulverized, but because of the exile, then they wanted to bring things together, but at first it was just it was probably like a work of well, I won't say that it was a work of fiction. It was an attempt to put together a literary corpus, and then I hate to use the word, propagandize it to the rest of the people until, like in the 300s BC, after Alexander died, society began to cohere, and when the Ptolemies came in and ruled over the land, and finally there was a revolt, and the Hasmoneans, the Maccabee brothers, began to assert independence from the Roman and Greeks that ruled that area, and I think that's when the idea of a centralized one Israel with one Torah and one story finally came together for them. So it was a process,
So that was around maybe in the first few centuries BC.
Yeah. In other words, I think the really adamant Judaism of the first century AD, or should I say CE, was it was a process that had to come together for people to feel so strongly about their faith.
Right.
Before that, it was just a loose association of people until finally it became one Judaism. Yeah. And it was just a process. Of course, like a century before, that's when you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, in 100 BC. Right, yeah. Yeah, something, or it's a kind of a range, but that's when you see those literary works having come together. But I'm just saying that you didn't have your ardent Judahites. Is that the word? Judahites, right away. It was just a process that came together. And, in times of stress and times of strain, people rally around, ideas that bring you together. And while at first putting together that canon, I guess we'll call it, in the 6th and 7th century, might have been an elitist project.
Yeah.
In the turmoil of the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire, in the being overrun by Romans, foreigners coming in and you becoming just another state or province of Rome, that stuff forced them together, and around what that corpus of literature that had been an elitist project.
Right.
Because another thing that you see, that William Deaver and Ted Lewis and them point out is that there weren't a whole lot of people worshiping Yahweh the way the Old Testament says Yahweh ought to be worshiped in and around Israel. Up until the 6th and 7th century and before and after. So
that seems to be the content of the Old Testament, is all of this bitching about you ain't doing it right.
Right.
Golden calves, you're doing this, you're doing that wrong, right? So this whole thing kind of came together as a critique of this almost paganism that came before it, and the multiple gods. And then we kind of settled down. It's like, let's put them all together and lump them together as one big Yahweh.
Well, I must apologize to the side chat for being rambling so much, and I've got to quote unquote head off to work, which just means open up a tab on my keyboard here and on my laptop here and get to work. So
yeah, okay. So what I'd like to do is keep a timeline all the time, and we should actually draw one and try to construct a timeline so that we have places that we can hang on to, right? So we don't get confused about all of this.
Right.
And start going through these books and trying to figure out, what.
Hey, you can save that off as a file, that drawing.
I can, but I wouldn't save one of my drawings. That would be travesty.
And I want to let Randolph know I've clicked on that link that he put in the side chat here, and I'll investigate it at my earliest convenience.
So I just want to warn you, Scott. So if I started saving these drawings, right, and 400 or 500 years from now, people found all these drawings and they started putting them together in one big document, and they call it the Testament of the Militant Atheist or something like that.
That's right.
And they ended up coming up, and they ended up trying to make something like, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah, we call it the Militant Atheist Testament.
Right. And then they basically uncover some video with me, and then I become. You see what I mean? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, you'll become the new savior.
You're the new Yahweh?
Yeah.
You'd be the new Yahweh, yeah.
Oh, no, I probably pissed off you Christians right there.
Yeah, I'm sure we're gonna be highly criticized among Sal or LPP and
and even real scholars are gonna say, you guys are idiots.
Yeah, you guys are making us look bad.
Yeah. So but maybe we might lure Dr. Josh and Pat Lawrence.
Well, maybe we could get Dr. Josh on here to just really bit slap us around.
Yeah, he definitely could pin down some timelines for sure.
Yeah.
But let's see. I'm just going to once again thank the side chat for putting up with my ramblings. Remember, this is just Monday morning stuff. We will always be a little unprepared, although I will try to bring in more concrete information about what the scholars I have been reading said.
Well, I got
this idea. It's been great. Wish we could have you on more.
Yeah. I got this idea on Saturday morning. We got together and we started talking about all this stuff, and I thought, hey, this is almost like this is something that we should probably ramble in public, and figure some of this stuff out.
Nothing but better than public rambling.
And there are some sciencey things that I would like to talk about and introduce, every other time, or 1 out of 3 times or whatever, because I really want to talk about this whole problem of the cell. And I don't think we can do that today, but
I wouldn't even ask any Christians, because they'd screw it all up, right? They'd have this.
I know, because
they don't know shit about it.
Well, the damn thing is,
fellas. We'll talk to y'all later.
All right.
Okay.
See you, Scott.
Bye.
So they're roughly doing the same thing that they did when they put the Old Testament together. They're mistaking what is happening today in Christianity as what happened all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. You have to look at the history of the thing, and so that's. It's ridiculous to do it any other way. You have to look at the context. So I'm 71 years old. So I was alive during the 60s, right? I don't know if people are forgetting about what happened in the 60s, but what happened in the 60s laid the bedrock for all this crazy Republican shit that's happening today, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's odd, but a lot of the hippies from the 60s, the boomers, somehow got set in their ways, and a whole bunch of them became staunch conservative Christians. And the way that happened is really, really interesting. We're all getting together, and we're basically overturning the entire establishment. We hate our parents. We hate the government. We hate everything, right?
Yeah. So you really think a lot of them became?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other ones became these goddamn nutcakes. These health food, woo woo. Eat this berry and you'll get healthy. These bullshits, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it all started around 1970, right? When the hippie movement coalesced, and as what's his name in the book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he said the wave grew and grew, and it hit, it hit up on the Rocky Mountains, and then it washed backwards. Then it went the other way, and that's kind of what happened. But from the 70s, okay, we had a couple things going on. We had the born again Christian movement, so the backs. So the born again Christians we were all getting together doing enough drugs to blow our minds right out of our goddamn skulls, right? So I'm sorry about my ringtone. So we were really stoned, and a lot of us got really hurt by drugs, particularly when methamphetamines entered the picture right around the 70s. And a lot of those people became born again Christians as a result of being really, really messed up, right?
Yeah.
And then we had the other group that popped up were the vegans and the holistic medicine people and all those nutcakes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Holism sort of thing going on, right? Yeah. And the crystal people and all that shit. All this happened in around 1970 in places like Minnesota, where we all got together and basically took enough drugs so that our minds were no longer functioning at all. And then the other thing that came up is the people that ran with that movement, right? And their rebellion was to go to a conservative sort of, they said, "Oh God, our parents were white."
More in that part. I was more in the conservative part, because I'm from the north, so there weren't any born again Christians in this area. That was all in the south, right? More or less.
We had a few, famously, Bosco and Hambone were two people that were, in our parties, and they burned out on drugs and they became Christians, and they would come to our parties and try to tell us that, but they were like these real spiritual Christians. And so we put up with them, but then they quit doing drugs for a year or two. Now Hambone today is in AA, and he's about 30 years sober, but Bosco continued to drink until he no longer had a mind, and he ended up getting hit by a semi in Virginia, Minnesota, and killed on a highway. He was basically brain dead. He totally wiped out his brain. So I mean, there was a smattering of these born again Christians going on in this, everywhere in the country, right? It was sort of sort of a result. But anyway, this whole thing coalesced into the 80s, and we got the 80s and then the 90s and then here we are today. A lot happened around 1970, between 1960 and 1970. And you go back even further to when I was a little boy, we were being driven by World War II, by coming out of World War II, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, these are the cultural contexts that I think were happening right around the time of Jesus. In the same manner, there was this upheaval because of the Romans.
It would be very similar.
Yeah. And I would like to know more about how much we can know about that cultural upheaval. Of course, here in 2022, most kids don't even know what the hell happened back in the 60s and 70s. They make some vague reference to hippies.
Right. Yeah.
And some kids probably don't even know what a hippie is. But this shit is important in American history right now, today. It is affecting us today. Like back in 1980s, 80s to 90s, I was raging against the got milk people, because in 1970 they were doing drugs and they decided to become healthy. And then we came up, and then basically the marketing people in New York took that idea and they came up with this got milk campaign, for healthy living, right? And they promoted milk. But milk was not the only thing they promoted. They were promoting vitamins and supplements and just all this bullshit, right?
Yep.
But those are all hippies that came up with that crap, and they just And then marketing took it and did something with it, and it just built who we are today. So we know a lot about it, or we can know a lot about it, but not many people know about it. What the,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I got to roll out and go read some biology.
Okay.
And
well, it's good hooking up with you guys. My schedules kind of suck, so I don't get a chance to
Well,
jump into
when do you have to? Yeah, I know we really miss you. We've been sending you links. So what is your schedule? I mean, are you available in the mornings like this?
Yeah, that is my best time. Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay.
That is a better time for me in the mornings. Yeah, early mornings. Yeah.
Last night while
Yep.
eating out, I made a joke about a TV meme from a '70s show. This pebble from my hand, and the 18-year-old waitress totally didn't get it. I didn't get it either. Sorry, Scott. Anyway.
This pebble from my hand. I wonder.
Yeah, I just want to go over
That
chat
wouldn't.
here.
Yeah. I wondered if that would be like. That wouldn't be like the kung fu guy taking the pebble out of the guy's hand.
Oh, yes.
Is that what he's talking about?
I think so.
Right? Grasshopper, and he snatched the pebble out of the guy's hand.
Yep.
I don't know if that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
In the late '70s and '80s.
There it is. Yeah, he just wrote that kung fu. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I got it right off the bat. I got it.
Yeah, and I was a real kung fu fan back then, and I should have got it. But okay, I remember in the late '70s and early '80s that some people were still terrified about the Cold War era making a comeback. They eventually shifted their fear to Halley's Comet crashing into the Earth. Yeah, exactly. We were afraid until I don't know. I think Reagan did a hell of a lot for all of that, basically with which of course leads us to Russia today, and we don't know what the hell's going on in Russia today. But anyway, so I think we're going to end her, David.
Yep.
Yeah. We're going to shoot her in the head, which is my favorite part.
Yeah.
You burn out. I'm going to go study some biology. I'm working on like hagfish and lampreys and what kind of kidneys they have, because I'm obsessed with kidneys for some reason.
Yeah. How did you heal up? Did you heal up pretty good?
Well, goddamn, I went out and I did a whole bunch of chainsawing and yard work and digging, and I'm planting a big wildflower garden, and I'm building a path down into the river valley. And I had chainsaws and I had a blower on my back, and I'm going up and down hills. And I walked in the house, and I think I screwed myself up again because I wasn't.
That doesn't sound like you should have been doing something that strenuous that early.
It has been 3 weeks. I mean, God, what am I? A goddamn snowflake? I'm not a snowflake.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going down there with the chainsaw again today because, God damn it, I'm not gonna take this shit for my kidney. It's like as I pointed out to my twins, oftentimes I say, "Be careful. I have 2 of you."
Yeah, I can always just get rid of one of you. Yeah,
only need one.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, shooting her in the head.
All right.
Get back to the world.